Welcome to the Evolutionary Empath Summit, a free online event where you'll discover how to transform your sensitivity into your superpower, with some of today's top experts ready to help you own your empathic gifts. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Bevan Neiman.
Welcome, everyone, from whatever corner of the planet that you're hailing from today. And I'm so glad that you're joining us because I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest, Ingrid Honkala. From her near-death experience at age 2, Ingrid Honkala, PhD, was aware of other dimensions of life and was gifted with guidance from what she calls the beings of light, who gave her insights and support as she faced the challenges of growing up and finding her professional destiny as a marine scientist. In her life journey from Colombia, a deadly war zone, to the USA and a NASA research center, she teaches how any life experience can be illuminated from within. Welcome, Ingrid, to the summit. We are so pleased to have you here today and to invite our audience to learn a little bit more about your experience and your work.
Yes, thank you very, very much, David, for having me here today. It's such a blessing and such an honor to be here.
So, Ingrid, can you tell us a little bit more about your own near-death experience and how that impacted you when you were so young?
Yes, this was an incredible experience, and incredible and at the time very difficult, and I will explain why. I had my near-death experience when I was very young. I was only about 2 years old, going to 3, when this experience happened. And at the time, I was living in Colombia with my parents and my sisters. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and at the time I was living in the house with my family, and also there was a maid that lived with us because at the time it was part of the culture that a maid will live with a family. And both of my parents at the time worked, and they would leave us at the care of the maid. And one morning early, my parents left for work, and she was a very young lady that really didn't pay too much attention to what we were doing when my parents were not around. So early that morning when my parents left, she went back to her room, and my sister and I, being little, like I said, I was almost 3, she was almost 4, and I had another sister at the time that was 1, decided that we were going to sneak out of the bedroom and go play. And we chose to go play in a patio that was in the house. And once there, we found a ball, and we like, oh, what about we play catch? And we chose to play in a tank, across a tank that was sitting at the back of this patio. And next to this tank, there was a flat surface for doing laundry. So the purpose of this big tank was actually washing clothes, the tank and the flat surface. And this was a very big tank that held about 900 gallons of water. And I just want to bring that most people think that because I was born in Bogota, or in Colombia, I come from a hot weather country, and that was not the case because Bogota is a high altitude city. So out there in the mountains can turn really, really cold. So that morning, the temperature in that tank had to be around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But we just didn't think about any of that, didn't think about any danger. And the tank, like I said, was pretty high, pretty big. So we grabbed a couple of stools, climbed on the tank. And my sister sat kind of comfortable on the flat surface that was next to the tank. And I went on the other side where there was a thin edge, and I bended my legs and pretty much like was positioned in a way that was pretty dangerous, but I didn't think anything about that at that age. you don't think about any danger. And then we decided, let's throw the ball at each other. And when she threw the ball, she didn't apply enough force, and the ball fell in the water. And when I tried to catch it, I thought it was close enough that I could grab it. So I leaned forward, went to grab the ball. It rolled on the surface of the water, and I fell in the tank. And at that moment, I didn't know. I didn't have any idea that if you fall into water, you drown. I was too little. At that moment, we didn't have a bathtub. Up to that point, I've never been in a pool or anything. So I didn't have idea that if you were underwater, you couldn't breathe. And the other thing, like I mentioned, the water in the tank was extremely cold. So the first thing I felt when falling in the water was the extreme sense of being freezing cold. And it was that sense like my chest had like pretty much imploded, and I couldn't breathe. And it came the horror. It came this desperate attempt to breathe. And in the midst of all this terror, suddenly I went from this state of absolute anguish to one of complete and absolute peace. It was the sense of calmness, the sense of joy, the sense of space, and now there was no need to fight anymore. And then there was few things during this experience that were pretty incredible and that show a big deal of contrast, because right before I had this sense of absolute calmness and serenity, the last thing I heard when I was drowning in the tank was the beating of my heart. And it was sounding in my head like a very loud drum, boom, boom, boom. And right there, it just stopped. And I experienced the incredible sense of absolute calmness, quiet, and silence. It's what I call the silence behind the silence. And another important contrast there was that I mentioned before, this was a big tank. This tank was made of cement, and it had a little roof on top, so it provided a shade, or if it was raining, people could be doing laundry anyway. So this tank was very dark. So that was the other thing. When I fell in the tank, the last thing I saw was a dark space. It was just dark. And I went from that darkness to suddenly, just in an instant, ping, a light. And that light came from below. And when this light came on, now it was, I described this like pretty much like the light of a candle, that even that dim light is able to illuminate the entire surrounding. And now I was like, oh, this light. And then I started to see bubbles that were floating in the water. And these bubbles were surrounded by light. Then, now it was like, what is? And I was started to chase these bubbles. And it was chasing these bubbles that I turned around, and I saw a body suspended in the water. And at that moment, I had the realization that was my body.
Wow.
And incredibly, I didn't feel fear, and I had the sense, this is amazing, because I had the sense that was normal. Oh, I had experienced this before. And then I saw the body, and there was another, I mentioned all these points of contrast because this is what made this experience impossible to forget. The other big contrast was that I was born as a very sick child. And I spent the first few years of the first almost 3 years of my life feeling very, very unwell. So when the experience happened and I was in such a state of freedom and well-being, I didn't want to go back to feeling sick, to feeling unwell. So when I saw the body, I also had the realization at the moment that I could decide not to go back to it. And I look at the body and say, I'm not going back there. And I turn around and I left. So it was amazing because there was all this awareness. Then as I turned around, I saw flowers that were blooming from just nowhere. And suddenly I was picked up by these flowers, and I was carried like in a forward direction. And it's the moment where I just had that sense of like when you go back to the womb and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to have any wish, any desire, any expectation, nothing. You're just being done. You're not doing absolutely anything. And while I was in this state of absolute peace and joy, in just a blink, I appeared in the maid's room. And I was like looking at her from, like if I was floating in the ceiling. I was looking at her from above. And she was lying on her bed, completely unaware of what was happening to me. And I tell people that this experience, Devin, is so vivid, that I can remember with clarity even the soap opera that she was listening in the radio that morning. And from there, I just pronounced her name. Oh, that's Maria. But nothing. She was completely unaware. And from there, in just a blink again, I appear in my mom's past. Like I said, she had left to go to work, and at the time she didn't have a car, so she had to walk. And her bus stop was about 10 minutes from the house. And the moment I met her, I said, oh, that's Mom. And at that precise moment, she stopped. And she even didn't hesitate. She didn't think she was just like, she stopped and she perceived, she sensed that something was happening at home, that there was something wrong, that something was happening with one of her babies, and she turned around and started to run back home. And at that moment, I just saw her, but I got distracted by the realization that wherever I put my mind, I could go. It was like time and space had vanished, and I could be anywhere at any time. And I started to play a game of going places, and I was having so much fun. And when, again, in just an instant, I appeared in a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And it was at that moment that I felt, finally, even like in all these years, these 3 years that have passed in my life, that was the first moment that I felt that I was home. I was coming back home. And I say I was coming back because I also felt that I was just returning home. I put the example to people. It's like, is this feeling of like you left for home, left to go to work in the morning from home, and you come back in the afternoon. And you just have this feeling, oh, I'm just back home. So it was like not even 3 years had passed. It was just like that, not time. And I felt the sense that I was being absolutely welcome. And although I didn't see anybody, I just had this feeling of being welcome. I am home. And although I saw my body suspended in the water, up to that point, I didn't have the realization that I was not Ingrid. that I was not that persona. So this when I realized, I am a being of light.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I started to have this sense that I was pretty much dissolving with the whole. And even though I was dissolving at that point, I was still having a sense of self. But from there, I went beyond. And I started to completely feel the dissolution of the self to the point that I can say I reached this point of non-self, or the point of, I just call it nothingness. And when people ask me what nothing means, and I only can say what is not, because actually there's not a description of what nothing means, so I just only can say the absence of form, color, texture, meaning, concept, feeling, definition. If I would say anything, I only can say it's a state of absolute presence. And while I was in this state of being, my mom finally arrived home. And although we live in a very big house, she knew exactly where to go, and she directed herself to the back of the house. So this is incredible. And back there in the patio was my sister. I tell people that maybe we'll talk about this later, but later in my life, I was able to know the purpose of everything that happened during my near-death experience, and that everything in that experience, that everything in our experiences have actually purpose. So that day, the purpose of my sister was to show my mom that for sure I was in the tank. So incredibly, my sister never moved from there, and she was actually trying to help me, but she was too little. Thanks God she didn't fall in the water too. So my mom jumped in the tank and got me out, and another amazing, incredible thing is that she knew CPR. She was trained CPR because she worked with children. So she did everything she knew, and she started to revive me. And at that moment, I was so detached, completely detached from this body and from all of it, that I didn't feel absolutely anything she was doing. And from there, again, like everything happens in this experience, in just a blink of an eye, in just a second, I felt that I was jumping from the tallest building in the world. And it was the sense of being pulled back, like vacuumed back, like sucked in the body. And there was nothing I could do to stop this. And then I found myself back in the body. And I knew that was bad because all the feelings of discomfort and pain and cold and all that was bad. And I was not happy. I was not happy at all to be back. And that's when, that's when after that, things, answering the second part of your question, that's when actually things afterwards became really hard for me, because this experience brought about a lot of change for me and for our family.
Right. So I think that you write about in your book that, this was a moment where your sensitive and empathic and intuitive gift really started to open up then. And this is true of many people, I think, who go through a near-death experience, is that something inside of them sort of opens to this other consciousness, that knowing that you were part of the oneness. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened for you, how that started to express itself as a child?
Yes, this was incredible and really hard too, because I was too young to really, not maybe to comprehend, to comprehend what was happening, but because I didn't have the environment around me at that moment that could help me understand and have clarity of all of these, and people around me were not aware and didn't know what just actually happened and how to work around it. So what happened is, like I mentioned, first I was not happy to be back because I have experienced such a state of well-being and such a state of joy and happiness that I was like, that was not present there. Because also the environment in the country where I was living and my house, and life was hard around me. So it was like seeing this contrast of, wow, I'm not seeing and experiencing that here. So when I came back, I felt very detached from all that was happening here, all the sense of drama, and I was born in a country at war, and all the difficulties and all the challenges, and I would just came with this, like you mentioned, I came with that sense of immense state of oneness. And when I saw my parents and I started to interact with them, I had the realization that they were not just my parents. I felt them as my equal. And I also came back, and when I saw my body, when I sensed and be back in this body, I was like, I am not a baby. I am not that baby. That's just the state of my body. And it was like I couldn't have that connection, and the kids around, I couldn't really interact with other children because I felt like, what is going on with these kids? They don't know anything. Because once I came back, I had not just that incredible sense of oneness, but also I came with skills. And I came with an awareness I didn't have before. And all that combined gave me the possibility to do things I couldn't do before. So not long after that, I started to read and write and solve mathematical problems and put together very complex puzzles. And I could, like my mom will take me places because I didn't want to be with children, and she will take us to places where we could, she could talk to her friends or family, and I would sit there and I didn't want to play with toys. I wanted to hear. And when they were talking about their problems and when they were talking about their challenges and life, it was incredible because I had that feeling of like, I know that because I have been there. Mm. And I know that because I have been there. So I had that empathy you mentioned, and I could feel their suffering, and I could feel, actually there was a moment in my life where I could feel the suffering of humanity. Mm. So I was a very, very sensitive child, but then when I realized that I couldn't really express my feelings, I couldn't express what I was experiencing, and people around me didn't understand what was happening to me, I stopped eating. I felt that sense of like I didn't want to connect, or I felt like angry. Mm. And I would look at myself in the mirror, baby, and pull my hair off and say to my mom, you don't understand, this is not me. This is not my name, and I should not be here. Mm. Yeah. And she will come and hug me and, no, don't say things like that and all this stuff. And then if things got really hard, and I want to mention something quick, and just to maybe for people to understand a little bit who my parents were. They were very young at the time. My parents were forced to marry when they were 17. So by the time my near-death experience happened, they were in their early 20s. And it was back in the 70s, and at the time, there was not like nowadays the TV with all the channels, internet, and all the ways to know all these. There was no concept of any of this. So trying to understand this girl that was going through such a hard time was difficult, but also, like I mentioned, in Colombia there was a war, there was all the difficulties. My parents didn't have that much money. So they had to deal with a situation that was hard, but they worked it through. And I said maybe at the time it was actually better that they didn't have enough money, because if they would have had the possibility to bring me to doctors and psychologists and all that, I mean, who knows how things would have gone. So, yeah, after that, things went even worse. I completely started to deteriorate in my health, but it's when I said the help that we need will come in the most unexpected way sometimes in life. And in my case, it came in a way that I could describe as a miracle. Because right after my near-death experience, I started to have what we know as out-of-body experiences. So again, at the time that I didn't know what was happening, but I would go to bed and I was being taken to that realm of the life that I experienced when I had my NDE. And every time I was being taken to this realm, I was seeing colors, movements, sounds that I have never experienced in this physical realm. And although all that was kind of really disturbing, I was being taken to that realm of the light, and I wanted to be there. And this kept repeating. And in one of these journeys, one day, I was completely surrounded by starlight figures that were shining in all different colors. I was mesmerized by this. And after that, this kept repeating. So I was now kind of like, oh, okay, let's go back. And in one of these journeys, one day, one of these beings that was shining in bright golden yellow color approached me, and it shaped itself into a human form, and it touched me. And at that moment, I was like, oh, you are a being of light. Mm-hmm. So that was amazing. That was absolutely beautiful, because this being wanted me to just understand that it was like me. Mm-hmm. That I could see, oh, okay, yeah, you are a being of light. Oh, and after that, I was really, really eager to go bed. Mm. And not long after, one day I was taking a shower, and I mentioned to people that people would think that because I drown, I will have this phobia for water, but it's actually completely the opposite. Because having the experience of drowning and being in the water actually brought me to see the light. So for me, water turned into a complete way. Like, it was so like, this is a passage. I felt relaxed and I felt incredibly well. So I was taking this shower when suddenly right there in front of me a huge blue bright light appeared in the shower. And at that moment, I just knew, oh, that's a being of light. Mm-hmm. And after that, they started to appear everywhere. And I started to heal, because every time I was in their presence, I felt the sense of being home. And I felt the sense of absolute love and joy. So I started to feel better, and I started to be able to communicate again with people and with my parents, and this sense of anger started to dissolve. And I will tell my parents that I was seeing beings of light, but they thought that I was just dreaming, that I was having good dreams. And the fact that they saw me doing better and that I was eating and eager to go bed, then okay, that's good. That's good. So life kept going, but I was still so detached from my persona and from my body that I was still throwing tantrums about that. So there was a day in which now we had a new maid, and she was calling me for dinner. By this time, I was already 4 years old, and I had been experiencing all this throughout this time, the being so light and all this. And she started to call me for dinner, and she would say, Ingrid, and I wouldn't come. And she came all mad, I'm calling you for dinner, Ingrid. And I said, don't call me like that. That is not my name. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me and she was like, so what is your name? How should I call you? And I told her, I do not need one.
This connection you made with the beings of light, I mean, what an incredible way to connect with other souls, you know, and you say that they gave you messages about things like, you know, people always wonder, you know, what's the purpose of suffering? So you talked about the contrast, you know, when you were in your physical body and you were sick and there was pain, and then this other side of this other dimension, this other realm that you visited where there was none of that. And so they actually gave you messages about the reason that we're here and the reason we go through the things that we do. Can you share that with the listeners today?
Yes. So it's been an incredible journey with them, because actually the day I threw that tantrum was the first time that they started to talk to me. And they said to me that it was going to take time for everyone around me to understand. And I was amazed, and I said, to understand what? And they said to understand that in the realm of the light, names are not needed. And when it was the first wow moment, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I understand why I don't need a name. So it was when this road with them started, and they just, from there, they started to say that all these gifts that I had and they were given to me were all to help me and to help others throughout the course of my life, and that someday time and experience will talk for me, and I could just share all these with other people. So later in my life, they also started to show me with clarity the purpose of all the things that had happened in my life, including the near-death experience. And that's when it comes a part of a very interesting contrast that happened during the near-death experience. And it was that they said to me, as I mentioned, during that experience, I went to meet the maid, and I went to meet my mom. And they said the reason why, although I saw my body, like I said, and I thought I'm not going back to that body. In reality, the reason I went to meet these two people is because I was going to come back. So, and I just, when I asked one of these questions, I was then, why did I go see the maid and didn't go just see my mom directly? What is the purpose of stopping there? And it was to offer some really, really important contrast right there. And it was when I went to see the maid, what happened is that there was no connection between the maid and us, between the maid and me. She was just a lady working in the house. She didn't have any sense of really love for us. Actually, she was a person that at the time that mistreated us. And so there was not anything like really tying this person to me. There was not any bond there. So, of course, when I called her name, and even she was closer to the place where I was drowning, even the moment I mentioned her name and was in her room, she couldn't feel absolutely anything. And then what I did after, I went to see my mom. And when I went to my mom and I say her name, she immediately felt my presence. And she immediately responded to it. So, of course, she could feel me because we have created that strong bond of course, love. And that's what the beings of light, or that's what this experience, they explained to me this experience, the core of this experience was to bring this teaching here, to bring the teaching of connection. Look what happened when we are disconnected. Look what happened when there's no love between two people. Then there's rupture. This person couldn't sense anything because to her we didn't mean anything. But what happened with my mom, wow, is what we have with the people we love. And on top of that, my mom was a highly intuitive person. So I said to people, all of us have the gift of intuition, but intuition is like a muscle. We have to work it. We have to develop it for it to just become more powerful. And so that's what happened, and this experience brought that extreme sense of like, I'm here to connect. I'm here to create true bonds with people. I'm here to bring this message of love, this message of connection. Because the more we feel that we're different from others, the more I feel the ego bring us to think, I'm not like you. I'm different from you. We are creating disconnection, and we're creating hate, and we are creating wars.
That is such an incredible message, and to be delivered that when you're at such a young age and then have carried that forward into your life. When you talk a little bit about the maid and that she was detached or didn't have that sense of connection to you or to the greater oneness. A lot of empaths and people who are going through a spiritual awakening, they get really passionate about this, but there may be other people in their life who still are a little bit separated or detached from that. How can they bring this spirituality, this message of connection and love and oneness to other people who haven't really woken up to that yet?
I think that for what I have learned throughout the course of my life, sometimes we try to use too many words, and that becomes like we are imposing what we know to others. So what I have learned is that what we have to do is to become the embodiment of that we're trying to give to others. I have an incredible experience with the beings of light, because I became a scientist, and of course now I was working with a lot of people that were not in touch with any of these, or didn't even think that any of these, or spirituality, or God, or were not open to any of these kind of things. And I would be there in the middle of all these, and I would ask the beings of light, well, what am I doing here? Because my yearn for spirituality has been with me my entire life. To the seeking of who am I, what is my purpose, what am I doing here? I want to be enlightened. That was my goal since always. So now being here was like, again, like experiencing that enormous contrast. And I asked, well, what can I do, or what can I say to these people that are not in touch with any of these, that don't understand it, that are not open to it? And the answer they gave me was absolutely beautiful, and something I have followed and done throughout the rest of my life. They say, do or say nothing. The light of your awareness is all they need. And they say the time when they're ready, the words for you will come. The time when you meet people that are ready for other things, then yeah, you will present it in a different way. But for now, just be that. Be that compassion. Be that love. Be that joy. Be that light of awareness. And wherever you are, they're going to feel it. And that was completely true. Even when I was working in these places, people would be like, what is with you? Why do you always have that incredible energy around you, and you're always happy, and be around you is a joy. And actually, when you establish this connection at that level, they don't know what is going on, but change is happening around you. And they will come to you and start asking questions. So that is my message to people. Don't try to force anything, because actually people will run away. They will be afraid. And that's what happened at the beginning with me when I was little and I didn't know. The being so like actually told me when I was little, don't talk to anyone because they're not going to understand. And I didn't, what do you mean they're not going to understand? And yes, once I started to say it or talk about it or try to make people, look, you have to see these, they will run away, be scared. Because when people are not prepared for it, they cannot take it. People get very comfortable with the known, and they're afraid of the unknown. So it has to be a process. Little by little, we will get there. And once we are that embodiment of love and compassion and understanding and kindness, people want to feel that, because that's what we are in our essence. We want to go back to that.
Thank you so much for bringing that message through. And I'm so grateful that your mother listened to her intuitive knowing and went back, and you had a chance to come back here in order to shine that light and be that presence for all of our listeners and everywhere that you go and where you've traveled around the world. You know, for the people who are tuning in today, is there a place, a website, or somewhere where they can continue to connect with you after the summit? Would you like to share that with us?
Yes, that of course. I have a website. It is ingridhonkala.com, and I am in all different media, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I also have a YouTube channel when I've been recording videos and been trying to share a little bit of this knowledge with everybody. And I also wrote a book that is available on Amazon for anybody that wants to read it.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, for being here today and sharing this incredible experience, how it changed your life, how it opened you to your sensitive and empathic gifts. We so appreciate your wisdom and insight today.
Thank you very much for having me here. This is, like I said before, such a blessing and an honor. I feel very grateful. So thank you very much, Bevin. This has been amazing.
And we would just like to show appreciation for everyone who tuned in today to listen to this interview. Please, just stand in your light. Just be a being of light. Shine that out to others with compassion and love and connection. And as Ingrid said, bit by bit, everyone will come to this in their own time, in their own space.
Yes.
Thank you for joining the Evolutionary Empath Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit evolutionaryempathsummit.com. To learn more about our global programs, supporting you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this empowering path of embracing your empathic gifts with your friends and family.